After Mark died, our house in Charleston became a cavern and old, beautiful place filled with memories and now only silence. It was one of those big houses with white columns and a porch that wrapped all the way around. The kind you see in Southern movies. We bought it together 6 years ago, right after our wedding, dreaming of children and summer parties, of growing old together. Now every room echoed with the sound of what used to be, Mark's laughter bouncing off the kitchen walls, the deep rumble of his voice coming from the upstairs hallway, the way he would whistle when he was shaving in the bathroom. It all felt like another life. The days after the funeral blurred into one another, as if time had decided to move in slow motion just for me. I wandered from room to room, picking up things Mark had touched, a cufflink on the dresser, his old reading glasses left by the living room sofa, his favorite blue sweater draped over the armchair. Each item felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried the weight of our whole life together. Sometimes I'd sit at the dining room table and just stare at the empty seat across from me, half expecting him to walk in with that easy smile, asking what was for dinner or if I wanted to go for a walk down to the pier. Friends and family tried to fill the void, but grief is a thing you mostly face alone. They called, sent messages, brought casseroles and flowers, and sat with me in the living room, awkwardly sipping coffee, searching for words that never seemed to come. Some of them tried to talk about the future, about what I'd do next, but I couldn't think beyond the next hour. I found myself withdrawing, letting calls go to voicemail, letting the flowers wilt in their vases, and ignoring the stacks of condolence cards that arrived in the mail. It was as if the world was gently telling me to move on, but I was anchored to this house and to the life I'd built with Mark. The lawyers came soon after the funeral, dressed in suits with somber faces and folders full of documents. They spoke quietly about Mark's estate, about his investments, and the old family money that had always felt distant to me. They told me with a kind of detached politeness that I was now in possession of $200 million. The number was so large it hardly made sense. I tried to imagine what that kind of money looked like, where it sat, and how it could ever fill the empty space that Mark left behind. It almost felt like a burden, something I was unprepared to carry. I didn't care about the money. I would have given it all back for just one more day with him. Most days I didn't leave the house. I would wake up in the big bed we used to share, roll over to his side, and pretend for a moment that he was still there. Sometimes I'd open the window and listen to the sounds of Charleston, the distant clang of church bells, the chatter of neighbors walking by, the warm, humid breeze that smelled of jasmine and salt water. I thought about the life I was supposed to have, the family we'd never start, and the trips we'd never take. Sometimes I'd talk to Mark, just to feel less alone. I'd whisper about my day, about the things that annoyed me, about the books I was reading just as I used to do when he was alive. Of course, there was no answer now, just the creak of the old house settling around me. At night, the emptiness grew sharper. I'd cook dinner for one, barely eating, then sit on the back porch and watch the fireflies drift through the garden. Our dog, Murphy, would rest his head on my lap, sensing my sadness. I'd watch the moon rise above the old oak trees and remember how Mark used to make up stories about the stars, pointing out constellations with that childlike wonder that never quite left him. Now, I couldn't even bring myself to look up at the sky. It was around this time that my sister Veronica started calling. She lived in New York City, in a high-rise overlooking Central Park, a world away from the slow, sleepy streets of Charleston. We had always been close, though life had pulled us in different directions. Veronica was a force of nature, bold, ambitious, and never afraid to speak her mind. She'd flown down for the funeral, of course, but had to rush back for work. Since then, she'd been leaving voicemails almost every day, her voice a mixture of worry and stubbornness. One morning, after another sleepless night, I finally picked up. Her voice was bright, but I could hear the concern beneath it. "Come to New York for my birthday," she said. "You need a break. I miss you. Everyone misses you. Just for a weekend, please." I wanted to say no. The thought of leaving Charleston, of leaving the house, made my chest tighten. But the truth was, I needed a break from myself. I needed to get out of the cycle of grief and memories, even if just for a few days. I needed to see the world beyond these walls, to remind myself that life still existed out there, even if mine felt like it had stopped. Veronica sensed my hesitation. "It'll do you good, Rachel? You can stay with me, we'll have cake and champagne, and I'll even let you sleep late. Just say yes." So, I agreed. I told her I'd come, booked the flight, and started making a list of things to pack. It felt strange to be planning something, even as simple as a trip. For the first time since Mark died, I felt a flicker of something like hope, or maybe just distraction. As I walked through the house, gathering my things, I realized that leaving even for a little while would not mean leaving Mark behind. He was a part of this house, and a part of me wherever I went. I promised myself I'd try to let the world in again, even if it was only a sliver at first. And so, with a heavy heart and a suitcase in hand, I locked the door behind me, whispered goodbye to the house, and stepped out into the uncertain future that waited beyond the front porch. Flying into New York City felt surreal. The Charleston airport had been quiet, almost sleepy, but now, as the plane descended, all I could see were endless grids of lights and movement below, the city pulsing with life even from the sky. I pressed my forehead to the cold window and tried to steady my breath, wondering if coming here was the right decision after all. Mark would have teased me for being nervous. He always loved a big city adventure. I gripped my suitcase, trying to channel some of his old confidence. When the plane finally landed, I shuffled through the crowds at JFK, the noise and bustle overwhelming after so many weeks of silence at home. My phone buzzed with a text from Veronica. "I'm waiting outside. Wear your best smile, birthday girl's orders." I couldn't help but smile at that. Veronica had always been the outgoing one, the one who threw herself into everything with impossible energy. Stepping outside into the chilly evening air, I spotted her immediately. Veronica looked every inch the New Yorker, her red lipstick perfect, her hair swept back, her heels impossibly high. She waved both arms, her laugh carrying over the traffic. As soon as I reached her, she enveloped me in a hug that was too tight, as if she thought I might break and needed holding together. I hugged her back, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. For a moment, I let myself relax. "You look tired," she said, squeezing my shoulders and searching my face for clues. "But you're here, and that's what matters. Wait till you see what I've got planned. You're not going to hide in my apartment, I'll warn you now." We took a cab to her place in Manhattan. The city flew past the windows, yellow cabs, neon signs, people everywhere. Everything seemed larger than life, and I felt strangely invisible, tucked into this moving bubble of energy. I watched Veronica chat with the driver, catching up on city gossip, and felt grateful for her confidence. I'd always relied on it, even when we were kids. Her apartment building was tall and sleek, with a doorman who smiled at me as Veronica swept me through the lobby. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and fresh flowers. The elevator shot us up to the 25th floor, and when the doors opened, I saw her apartment was already buzzing with people. Laughter and music spilled out into the hallway. "Go on in, I'll bring your suitcase later," Veronica said, pushing me gently toward the door. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The apartment was everything I expected from Veronica. Big windows with city views, bold art on the walls, white couches covered in colorful throw pillows. There was a long dining table covered with cakes, appetizers, and bottles of champagne chilling in ice buckets. Strings of fairy lights twinkled around the ceiling, casting a warm glow. People mingled everywhere, each one dressed as if for a magazine shoot. The air hummed with the sound of a dozen conversations. Veronica introduced me to her friends in quick succession, names flying by faster than I could remember. Julian was the first, a tall, handsome man from London, with an easy grin and an accent that made everyone around him laugh a little louder. He handed me a glass of champagne and welcomed me to the madhouse. Then there was Maggie, a petite woman with wild curly hair who worked for a fashion label and seemed to know everyone in the room. Victor, who talked about his penthouse in Paris and the art gallery he was opening in Europe, cornered me by the kitchen and launched into a story about his latest trip to Venice. Everyone seemed at ease, caught up in a world of parties and gallery openings and Wall Street gossip. For a little while, I let myself be carried along by their stories. I smiled, I nodded, and I tried to laugh at the right moments. It felt good to be surrounded by people, even if none of them knew the fog I was walking through. There was a kind of comfort in being just another guest at Veronica's birthday, in not having to talk about Mark or answer the same painful questions again. Still, underneath the laughter and the music, I could feel Veronica watching me. She floated through the party, always just at the edge of my vision, refilling drinks and greeting guests, but her eyes kept darting back to me, as if she were waiting for something. I wondered if she was worried that I might suddenly fall apart, or if she was just glad to finally have me there. We had always been close, but since Mark's death, I'd felt the distance between us grow, my grief making me unreachable, her life in New York too busy for long phone calls. This weekend, I thought, was her way of pulling me back in. As the night went on, more guests arrived, and the party spilled out onto the balcony. The city stretched out below, glittering and endless. Someone put on a playlist, and soon people were dancing, their voices rising in song. I sat on the edge of the sofa, sipping champagne and watching, feeling half present and half somewhere else. I tried to imagine what Mark would have said about this crowd. He would have charmed them all, told stories, maybe even danced a little. I wish he could have seen me here, trying to start again. At some point, Veronica sat down beside me, kicking off her shoes and tucking her feet beneath her. She studied my face, her expression softer than usual. "I'm glad you came," she said quietly, touching my hand. "I know it's not easy, but you're not alone, okay? Not ever." For a moment, the noise faded, and it was just the two of us, sisters in a city that felt both strange and hopeful. I squeezed her hand, letting myself believe her words. The night grew late, and the apartment slowly emptied. Dishes piled up in the kitchen, and someone started a final round of birthday toasts. Veronica's friends hugged her goodbye, promising to meet for brunch, and Julian slipped out with a wink and a promise to call. I helped Veronica gather plates, the two of us working in companionable silence. When the last guest left, she poured us each one last glass of wine and led me to the window. We watched the city together, the lights still shining, the sky just beginning to hint at dawn. "You know," she said, her voice gentle, "it's okay to start over. You don't have to know how. You just have to want to." I didn't answer, but I let her words settle inside me, feeling the first stirrings of something like hope. For the first time since Mark died, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was still a life for me out there waiting to be lived. I thought I had braced myself for anything Veronica's birthday could throw at me. The party was bigger than I'd imagined, more glamorous than anything I would ever plan for myself. Veronica loved the spotlight, and her living room looked like a scene from a movie, glassware sparkling in the lights, guests laughing in small, elegant clusters. For most of the night, I moved quietly between groups, listening to stories, refilling my glass, and finding comfort in the gentle thrum of music and voices. I told myself I was doing fine, that this little window into normalcy was just what I needed. But as the night wore on and the clock inched toward midnight, I could feel something changing in the air, a nervous energy, a crackle of anticipation I couldn't quite place. Veronica was making her rounds, hugging friends and snapping photos, but her eyes kept finding mine across the room, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, but I wasn't. At last, someone began gathering everyone in the living room, and Veronica appeared beside the cake, her lipstick fresh, her cheeks flushed. The birthday candles flickered, the city lights behind her like another layer of candles stretching out into the night. I felt strangely removed from it all, as if I were a guest at someone else's celebration. As the last of the guests settled in, Veronica raised her glass and tapped it with a silver spoon. The room fell quiet, all eyes turning to her. My stomach twisted in a way that had nothing to do with the champagne. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice ringing out. There was a hush, the anticipation now fully awake. Veronica looked radiant, almost otherworldly, as she glanced around the room, her gaze lingering on me. "I wanted all of you here tonight because you're my family, my real family, not just by blood but by choice." A few people smiled and raised their glasses in a little cheer, but Veronica wasn't finished. She waited, drawing out the moment. I felt my palms grow sweaty, then she took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant," she said, her eyes shining. There was a burst of surprised laughter, a smattering of applause. Maggie squealed and ran over to hug her. Julian offered a toast, his British accent making the moment sound even grander. I blinked, surprised Veronica had never mentioned wanting children. But beneath the shock, I felt a flicker of happiness for her. Maybe this was what she needed, a fresh start, a new life to love. But then, just as the room began to settle, Veronica held up her hand, her eyes fixed on me. The hush returned, heavier this time. "There's something else," she said. "It's important. I want to be honest with everyone, especially my sister." Her smile was brittle now, her jaw tight. The baby's father was Mark. The room fell silent, as if the city itself had stopped breathing. I felt the words hit me like a physical blow, my mind struggling to make sense of them. Someone's glass slipped and clinked against the table, but no one moved. I stared at Veronica, searching her face for some sign of a joke, a glimmer of irony, anything that would tell me this wasn't real. But she only looked back at me, eyes wide and shining, a strange determination in her expression. "I think, under the circumstances," she continued, her voice trembling only slightly, "it's only fair that I receive half of Mark's estate. Half of the $200 million he left behind. For the baby, for Mark's child." For a long, terrible moment, no one said a word. All eyes were on me now, waiting for my reaction, as if this were just another dramatic twist at one of Veronica's parties. The pressure in my chest was unbearable, my heart beat loud in my ears. I felt as though the ground beneath me was shifting, the old wounds of Mark's death suddenly torn wide open in front of a room full of strangers. "Are you serious?" I finally managed, my voice barely more than a whisper. Veronica nodded, her expression unyielding. "Yes, I need what's rightfully mine. Mark and we made mistakes, but this baby deserves everything." "I know you're grieving, Rachel, but it's the truth." I stared at her, the words echoing inside me. 100 thoughts rushed through my mind, confusion, anger, grief, disbelief. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand she take it back, to insist that she was lying. Another part of me just felt numb, as if the shock had frozen everything inside. Someone in the back cleared their throat, and the sound seemed to break the spell. The room shifted, people glancing at each other, at me, at Veronica. No one seemed to know where to look. Julian set his glass down carefully, as if afraid it might shatter. Maggie looked away, tears in her eyes. Even Victor, who was never at a loss for words, stood silent. I took a slow, unsteady breath, trying to find my voice. "Veronica, this isn't the way, and you know it." "Mark," I paused, unable to finish the sentence. The pain was almost physical, a deep ache that ran all the way to my bones. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. But Veronica only pressed on, her words tumbling out, desperate and brittle. "I know you probably hate me right now. I know this is hard. But you have to understand Mark meant everything to me too. And this baby, this is all I have left of him. Please, Rachel, I just want what's fair." I opened my eyes and looked at her, really looked. I saw a woman on the edge, grasping for something she thought she needed. I wondered if she believed her own story, or if she just needed something, anything, to fill the emptiness inside her. The guests began to drift away, murmuring their excuses, eager to escape the uncomfortable scene. Soon, it was just the two of us, the remnants of the party scattered around us, candles burning down to puddles of wax. "I need time," I said finally, my voice shaking. "I need to think." Veronica didn't move. She just stood there, shoulders squared, daring me to challenge her. I left the room then, walking to the window and staring out at the city below. My mind was reeling, my heart pounding. For the first time since Mark's death, I felt truly alone, betrayed, bewildered, and uncertain of everything I thought I knew. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet, stubborn strength began to stir. Whatever happened next, I knew I had to face it head-on. Mark may have been gone, but I was still here. And I would not let anyone, not even my sister, rewrite the truth of our lives. For a long moment after Veronica's announcement, I could only stare at her. My mind whirled with everything that had just been said, but the longer I looked at her, the more absurd it became. It was as if the pain and tension of the past weeks, all the confusion and loneliness had finally reached a point where something inside me snapped. Suddenly, to my surprise, I started to laugh. At first, it was just a short, breathless giggle, the kind you let slip when something's just too much. But then the laughter grew, bubbling out of me, unstoppable, ringing loud in the silence of that polished, expensive room. It wasn't the kind of laughter that meant joy, but the kind that comes when the truth is so ridiculous, so impossible, that there's nothing left to do but laugh at it. The guests who remained looked from me to Veronica, their eyes wide, caught between discomfort and curiosity. Veronica's face flushed, her lips pressed together in a hard, angry line. "Why are you laughing?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut the air between us. I wiped a tear from my cheek, struggling to get hold of myself. My laughter finally quieted, and I took a deep breath, the absurdity of the moment finally sinking in. I looked at her, and my voice was gentler than I expected. "Veronica, I'm laughing because what you're saying, it's impossible." She blinked, her jaw tightening. "What do you mean?" Still catching my breath, I shook my head, amazed at how calm I suddenly felt. Because Mark was infertile. We tried for years, Veronica. I sat beside him in waiting rooms all across America. We even saw a doctor in Europe, hoping for some kind of miracle, but the truth was always the same. Mark couldn't have children. A hush fell over the room, even deeper than before. I saw Maggie's hand go to her mouth, her eyes darting between the two of us. Julian, who had always been quick with a joke or a comforting word, suddenly looked at his shoes, as if the pattern in the carpet might offer some explanation for what was happening. I took a step closer to Veronica, my heart steady now. "No one told you?" I asked softly. He was open about it with me. He even grieved for the family we would never have. "I'm sorry, Veronica, but whatever you think happened, it just isn't possible." For a moment, I thought she might collapse right there. Her shoulders sagged, the confidence and fury draining out of her all at once. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Around us, her friends began to murmur, the room full of uncomfortable shifting and averted eyes. I watched as reality set in for her, watched the story she'd built for herself fall apart in real time. It was almost painful to see, but I felt no urge to comfort her. For the first time since Mark's death, I felt something like peace wash over me, a quiet certainty that the truth was finally out, and nothing could shake it. Veronica shook her head slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "But he never said anything to me, he never told me." I swallowed, my voice gentle but firm. "He didn't need to. That was between us, and it wasn't anyone else's business." "I'm sorry you're in a difficult place, Veronica, but dragging Mark's memory into this, trying to take what he left behind by building a lie, it's not fair to anyone, least of all you." She stood there, speechless, her cheeks burning with a flush that looked more like shame than anger now. Around us, the last of the party's glamour faded away. Even the candles seemed to shrink back from the cold truth in the room. One by one, Veronica's friends slipped out, awkwardly mumbling their goodbyes, until it was just the two of us standing in the middle of a mess of empty glasses and crumpled napkins. She couldn't meet my eyes. I took a long look at her, my anger and hurt fading into something quieter, almost pity. Veronica had always lived in a world where she believed she could bend things to her will, her career, her relationships, her own story. But some things I realized now were simply out of our control. She wasn't a villain, just a woman who couldn't stand the emptiness, who wanted so badly for something to fill it. I turned away, suddenly exhausted. I didn't need to fight anymore. I didn't need to argue or prove myself. The truth was enough. That night, in Veronica's guest room, I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed and stared out at the lights of the city. I thought about everything Mark and I had been through together, the late-night talks, the heartbreak of bad news, the gentle way he would hold my hand when I was scared. I let myself remember him, really remember, without the weight of loss pressing down so heavily. For the first time since he died, I didn't feel crushed by grief. Instead, I felt as if I was carrying a part of him with me, something unbreakable. I pulled out my phone and booked a flight back to Charleston for the next morning. I was ready to go home. My house there would still be too big, the rooms still too quiet, but I realized now that I could fill them with new memories. Mark's life, our life together, was not just a story that ended in tragedy. It was a story full of love, laughter, and truth. That was mine to keep, no matter what anyone else tried to claim. The next morning, as I closed the door behind me, I left Veronica to face her truths. I stepped into the bustling streets of Manhattan with my suitcase in hand and my heart a little lighter. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew that, whatever happened, I would face it with honesty and courage. I would live the life Mark and I had dreamed of, even if I had to do it alone. Back in Charleston, I unlocked the door to my empty house and walked inside. The silence greeted me like an old friend, gentle and familiar. I set down my bag and looked around at the place where our love had lived. For the first time, the emptiness didn't scare me. I was ready to let the world back in, to open the windows, to breathe in the sweet southern air. I was home, and my truth would always be enough.